Dan,
Yes.
it's my pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you, Father Adam Sewell.
And, well, could you introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Donald Chodkowski.
Mhm.
I guess, as I was told, that of course the Polish pronunciation is Chodkowski.
Mhm.
It depends on what side of the Atlantic you're sitting on.
Mhm.
Chodkowski might be translated in Polish.
And
So,
you are third generation
yes, third generation. My grandparents came here in the um,
at the end of 19th century.
End of the 19th century, correct, Father?
Mhm.
Yes, they came at the end of the 19th century as teenagers looking for a better life.
Mhm.
My one grandparent, as a matter of fact, mystery mystery has it that he was Hippolyt Kobylinski, and he wanted to keep avoiding uh, being pushed into the Russian army because he wasn't a Russian, but the
Mhm.
Russians needed bodies to go to war or
So
something.
if you remember, if I remember, they came from Warsaw area.
They did. They came from Chichanov and Pabuki.
Mhm.
Pabuki, I think, is a. Anyways, they came from um, outside of Warsaw,
Mhm.
and
Ciechanów, right?
yeah,
Mazowsze, if I am
yeah,
right.
Mazovsha. Good.
Mhm.
That's right. I don't think of that Mazovsha.
Mhm.
Because I'm not a Polish scholar by any means. I Polish was my first language
Mhm.
as a tot,
Mhm.
and then
So did you ever learn Polish?
right. I spoke Polish, probably better than English at one point.
Really?
At one point as a young little guy, and then once my parents set up their own household, then we conducted business in English,
Mhm.
and so the Polish was just a secret language that parents could have,
Mhm.
because they grew up in Polish households, and
Mhm.
so I actually got to see my my great grandmother Blanche. A lot of people don't have that privilege to meet grandparents or even great
Mhm.
grandparents. So I had.
And your family and you
Mhm.
yourself belong to the Polish National
Right.
Catholic Church, which is in Polish, Polski Narodowy Kościół Katolicki
Yes.
in America.
Right, but there is a schism. There's a schism in our family, and I could, even as a small me as a child, I could understand there was tensions because one one quarter of our family, the Chodkowskis in South Milwaukee, Poland, um, where my my grandmother, I think her name was Blanche, but she married outside of the Roman Catholic Church. So
Mhm.
she took us into um, Polski Narodowy
Kościół katolicki.
Kościół
Mhm.
Katolicki because with Grandpa Chodkowski, his name was Kazimir Chodkowski,
Mm.
and he had this loyalty to the Polish National Catholic Church
Mhm.
right from the beginning of the 20th century,
Mhm.
and
So it started
it started
almost like at the beginning
almost at the beginning in
of the new church. I mean,
St. Peter and Paul in South
independent
Milwaukee.
Catholic Church. Mhm. Mhm.
Whenever St. Peter and Paul,
Mhm.
his parents probably were founders of the South
Mhm.
Milwaukee parish. Father,
So, but you are Chicagolander, right?
and
You.
my mother was Chicagolander, and after the war, my parents could have very easily um, settled in Wisconsin, where
Near
my
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, because that's where Dad was from, and
Mm.
then Mom was from Chicago. But they were somehow acquainted through family, family ties. They're acquainted somehow, and so that's how someone from Milwaukee actually met someone from Chicago, and the employment opportunities appeared to be better in Chicago, so that's
Mhm.
why we live here.
Mhm.
And my dad always had a strong belief in the Polish National Catholic Church,
Mhm.
and so when we were younger, and we just attended a church for convenience sake
Mhm.
on holidays with mom.
So what church?
My mom's parents were married at the cathedral,
The
in
old
old
cathedral of All
cathedral in
Saints,
All Saints on Dickens and Damon.
Dickens and Damon.
Yeah, that's
very close to downtown.
Right, but when we actually renewed our participation, my dad was a director at this church, Stanley, and we renewed our participation. The church was on Major, and we had for a short time, which we really remember, and my mom always relished. We had Father Kovich,
Kovich,
yeah,
yes.
and that was, and prior to Father Kovich, we had Father Morosic, and
What was the name of the church?
it was the name of the church is Saint Cyril and Methodius Polish.
So from Cathedral you
we
moved
moved
to
because what had happened is that we had left that area. My family lived close to, let's say, Western, North Avenue and Western, and then we moved way far out to the end of Chicago on the west, on the northwest side. So then my family and Helen Caden, God rest her soul, family friends, all had this interest in the Polish National Catholic Church, and she took all these kids. We had four. I had one sister and two brothers, and then there were some Caden children as well, and we all met with Father Kovich, and we became members of the St. Cyril Methodius Polish National Catholic Church.
So you actually you belong to St. Cyril and Methodius
Right,
Parish
from the start, always.
from the beginning, from the
beginning.
start, right?
Now, but my mother had some familiarity. Her parents supposedly, Hippolyte, they were married at the old cathedral, but so she knew about that, and people like Hippolyte and Mary Kobylinski wanted their daughters to be more more familiar and more opportunities for meeting and for employment and other things, so that she then, my Kobylinski side, they started over to the Roman Catholic Church. You see, so Mom was like in between, and then when she met Dad, he was staunchly in favor of the Polish National Catholic Church. So we came over, and we had Father Kovich, who had not served at St. Cyril Methodius for too many years, and prior to him, I did not see Father Morosic and I know other fathers too, but I've heard of Father Morosic and Father Matla were still living at the time when we came over to St. Cyril Methodius Church.
But that church was on different street, right?
It was on Major. It was an older building.
Is this building still exist? Or
no, it was all demolished. Supposedly my uncle Mitchell Kobylinski, his land development with Ted, and they demolished the church and put up apartment buildings
so there's
maybe it's
completely
condos, or it's completely changed. I don't even.
Can you recognize that
No,
area?
I haven't been there. It's not far from Grand. It's not far north of Grand Avenue on Major Street, and it's on the east side of Major Street.
So it is very typical for Chicago. Chicago is a very dynamic city, and changes are
Changes. You're
very
right.
typical
There
to
was
this place.
There was a hall. There was a hall that the kids. It was filled with kids. Over 120 kids. Edgar Hansen and his wife, who might still be living. They're relatives of DeJohn, and they were instrumental in running the Sunday school for all these kids. So this church has always been rich to have people who could scrimp and save. I know Father Kobylarz always talks about a point in time for St. Cyril's Methodius when we only had a very, very small treasury, almost incredibly like $8 or something like that.
So Dan, do you remember when our existing church, present church, was
right? When it was
when
a
the
vacant.
construction was.
It was a vacant
started?
lot. It was this was a vacant lot that we purchased, and I imagine that. I don't remember the funeral home next door, but I imagine that it was pre-existing. It was Joseph de Nicolo Funeral Home, next door. He was a very nice man and a good friend of the church, of course, and it's good business. And Father Kobilars would always want as many funerals as possible at one or two funeral homes. You know, he would be more encouraging to have it with.
So, do you remember how long it took to build this church? Like
No,
maybe
I don't
1 year?
remember that. I don't remember how long it took because I was still a child, and so I do remember that the church was not finished or not ready, and we had green. We had first put in lime green paint. The ceiling was lime green, which was an unusual color, but it was chosen to command well with the golden fixtures, the golden lights that are, we had these, the light fixtures are gold, so that
Right.
I don't know what the lime color was, but I think that's why it was chosen, and yet people had a difficulty with that being an unusual color for a church. And prior to the church being ready, we had our services first in the basement downstairs.
Oh, okay.
And so there's an old altar downstairs, and I just wonder
Right.
if that goes back to the first days with our church. There's an old.
Is this the place where the picture of our Prime Bishop Francis Hodor is?
Yes.
So
Yes.
the altar
Well,
was at this?
but actually, because we have a stage downstairs, I'm rather sure that it would have been Father Kobilars officiating at the altar on the stage. But I'm not, you know, I rather think that that's probably where they put, and then the chairs were all set up facing the directional west, where that would be the best I can tell you about the first services in this church.
And did you receive any sacraments?
Oh yes.
In this church?
Right, exactly. This group of mine, my sister, going down to the youngest sister, she's 4 years younger than I, and our associates, the Cadens, you might call them our cousins, but there's no blood tie. The Cadens and the Chodkowski children were all receiving First Holy Communion, and I remember very distinctly that it was difficult, and it was a beginning cruise for the very young priest, Father Joseph Kobilars. He was.
So you remember him since
I
he
remember
was very young priest,
He was a
right?
very young priest, yes. And first Joseph Kobilars had been at the cathedral, because our friend, our treasurer here, Ann Kruger, remembers him earlier dates than I do. And but when he came here to replace Father Kovich, because we were grateful for Father Kobilars' energy, his intellect, and his input, and his love for the church to take on a building task. You know, it's not. They didn't want to take someone who didn't have this viber, this. They wanted to take in a priest probably who was younger, because our church was struggling, so to speak, with all these people, and they needed a new
Energetic
location.
priest. Yeah.
An energetic priest, yes.
So Dan, you mentioned also other churches, like you said, cathedral. You said. So do you remember any other churches of parishes of our church, Polish National Catholic Church in Chicago? Do you remember
Yes.
any other?
I've been there, yes, to other places, not so much in Indiana. Maybe we did have one seniorate meeting in Indiana that but I do remember visiting, it was Father Joseph Tomczyk, and he was a colleague of our priest, Monsignor Joseph, and Father Tomczyk, he had the church at St. John's, and that
St.
was
John,
St.
South
John.
Side, right?
On South Kedzie. So I was there a few times, and I remember, I think he's a bishop, Bishop Tomczyk. I think he became a bishop for just a few years before his unfortunate passing. But Bishop Tomczyk was over at St. John's, and
Any other churches?
And also I did make a
names?
point, I went out of my way one day and I seen, I went to see Divine Word.
Divine Word.
Divine
okay.
Word.
Mhm.
I was there and I remember these two kind of chubby kids. They had a chubby father, Father Vakna, who was a very good priest, and I think he also, Father Vakna, he came from the east as well as did Father Kobilarz. And Father Vakna, and he had these two chubby kids, and because you
Probably
know
one of them we know, right?
yes, man, yes, right, yeah, right. One of them,
Marty.
Marty Vakna, right, and then the brother you don't hear about. But anyways, but these two chubby kids were out playing, and because they were kids and they were playing, you didn't really have a good, you didn't understand their brilliance and their future, you know, because at that time but I remember just seeing the outside of Divine Word. They didn't offer. I just didn't ask to go inside of
So what
Divine
other?
Word. And also we also had a function one time at the Good Shepherd Church.
Good Shepherd Church.
Yes, and a lot, and as Good Shepherd, that neighborhood changed, and we were able to draw people who, I don't know if they brought over their rivalries or what, but they also brought over a great love for the Polish National Catholic Church, and our church, St. Cyril's, was rich and fortunate that we could pick up people who maybe moved to Niles or moved out of the city. The Hatchko, Alexander Hatchko. We had our key people were Joseph and Irene Witwicki, and they had a remarkable relationship with Father Kobilarz. Like they could talk to him like I could talk to you, and use like. What's your problem today? You know, they could just talk informally. And they were big friends of the church and did a lot of work at the church, and they were church officers. Also, we picked up the family Belkar, and George Belkar, of course, became a prominent person in the national synod. He became a delegate, of course, to the Supreme Council, and he was a very vocal advocate of the Polish National Catholic Church, and these people were all very, they all supported young people quite well as far as to be positive and to promote our participation and look the other way when we maybe made a boo-boo. Being a young person, you can have mistakes that you make out of judgment, and I do that now as a parish committee director.
Well, older you are, more humble you are, wiser you are.
Yes.
And because of this, we have
But they're
different
remarkable.
perspective to look at life.
Yes.
Dan, you were witness of many changes in Polish National Catholic Church, Western Diocese, and Chicagoland.
Right.
Chicago every decade is different. Is a different city. So how could you see our parishes at that perspective, the demographics of Chicago? Did we follow like Polish American neighborhoods
We did.
close to?
I think so. This
So
area,
our churches were built in Polish American neighborhood.
Polish American,
Polonia, right?
Polonia, right. It has been, and where we are now, it has a very strong Polish heritage, and the past has been very Polish.
So Diversity was very Polish street
Yes,
at this
Diversity was very Polish.
section, right?
All these houses were very well maintained, and you didn't businesses, of course, as a younger person, and not really coming. We came in. Our parents would drive in from Harlem Avenue and Irving, so I can't tell you what type of businesses or such. We had one of our good parishioners that we really liked and treasured was an Italian barber down on Diversity, a little bit east, and he was coming to our church until his health gave up and he sold his barber shop.
So then, so our churches were built and our parishes in the past, and I still think in the present, are somewhere in Polish neighborhoods.
Yes.
Um,
And you still have a lot of, this is still a Polish neighborhood, there's still, I've encountered, Polish neighbors, but it's more now of an American neighborhood because, of course, once the Polish people are second and third generation, then their attitudes and their preferences are somewhat
more American.
more American, more diversified, but we still have, as we talked earlier, we still have a Polish predilection. We still.
No, even our neighbors. There's that building, Polish Alliance.
Polish National Alliance, right?
The Polish clubs that we have on the other side of the street.
Yes.
So it is still Polish neighborhood.
Yes.
And how did you see? Did you see any evolution of our members, or maybe the changes in the ethnicity of our members? At the beginning, it was strictly Polish American church,
Yes,
right?
Polish American church, and we.
So, do you remember that? Do you remember? Can you share with us your recollection, your memory? When you were a child, it was like 100% Polish Americans, right?
Yes, it was 100% Polish American. Actually, when I was a child, or even as a young adult, at some juncture, we always had Polish language. There was no.
So it was in Polish, right?
Everything was in Polish, and we learned the rhetoric in Polish, even though we didn't
speak at home.
We didn't speak it at home, but the church did provide a nice older lady who was willing to teach us Polish, and we would come on Saturdays
to Polish school.
We would come. This would be about 4 neighborhoods that we lived, and we would have to travel through four neighborhoods to get here and go to Polish school. Right. And so we learned Polish from her, and we also then had our catechism lessons from Father Kobylarz.
And it was in Polish.
And of course the catechism lessons were in English.
It was in English.
Yes, Father was teaching us in English, and he was obviously still learning to teach and still giving it his best as a novice type instructor. I'm sure he learned how to handle these kids at the seminary in Scranton.
So then, so the Polish language was primarily the liturgical language, right?
No one would have an interest in coming to our church until a time if they weren't Polish. It was for Polish
people. So it was very strong attitude and benefit of this church,
let's
right?
say in the 50s and the early 60s, and then I think somewhere in the late 60s or somewhere in the 60s probably
evolved to
we
English,
evolved
right?
to English
or bilingual.
Bilingual, right? We had a synod, and they said you can have your masses in either both languages. It still is in following our faith.
Yes, because the main idea of our church was to have liturgy in the language of people, right?
Right.
The language that people understand.
Right. And my parents, Polish Americans that they were we only have Polish blood, but they were living and working and dealing in an American society. We spoke only English.
Right.
And my vuya, Mitchell Kobylinski, he was having his kids learn 2 languages.
So, but I understand, and I guess that many people just used also Polish language at the parish, just in social communication between each other, right?
Yeah, so that's no doubt that's true. But I, as a youth, I never.
Young generation used English.
The next generation, so I didn't really. I respected the older generation, and then as I got to be a committee member, one day I was heading out the door, and there was a call on the phone. I picked up the phone, and it was Father Joseph Kobylarz recruiting me to be on the parish committee.
So, Dan, right now move to another maybe chapter of our or stage of our conversation
Right.
about your active membership. You
Yes.
were dedicated in your heart to this
Yes.
parish, to our Polish National Catholic Church, and older um, you grew up, you became adult person. You took some responsibilities for the parish, for your
Yes.
local community. Could you
Yes.
tell us what kind of functions did you had in the past and present in our church? Right now you are one of our directors,
That's
but
right.
in the past you had different functions and
Well,
obligations.
I was recruited.
Could you like start chronologically? What
Right.
was the first and what was the
This would have been in the early '70s that I became a parish committee member.
so
And I
in
was
70s you
in the
became a,
'70s. I was recruited. Similar, we're doing that today. We're taking people and we're having them become. I was the vice chairman, so I was the second in line to command this church. But I didn't have parish committee experience. We had. I was recruited because Tom Porzak was coming to be the chairman. I think he took over from uh, Mr. Joseph Witbitsky,
mhm.
and so I think that was the president before Tom, and Tom wanted to be our chairman, and so he didn't want an older gentleman to, and so he put me into an election, and all of a sudden it was the older generation running against the younger, and I've seen this a few times in our church, this tension or what have you, but in our church the people were still loyal to the church and the Adoration Society, and I sometimes I can't remember the gentleman who I ran against. I wasn't acquainted. I barely knew Tom. I knew Tom Porzak and his brother were very instrumental in serving the church and helping, but I didn't know Tom Porzak personally, but he did become a friend of mine, and so he called or Father put us together as the vice chairman, and I won that election. Typically, when I see these parish elections, they'll always favor the younger person.
Mhm. So you
I started as a vice chairman.
so you were vice chairman, and for how many years have you been?
I was a vice
Having-
chairman for maybe 6 or 8 years,
Mhm.
and then of course Tom Porzak left the church, and
So after that you
I became. Well, no, I didn't become president right away. I don't believe. I think that I had a separation from the committee. I was still coming to church, or maybe I was a collector.
Mhm.
But there might have been a time when I didn't serve on the committee, and then eventually I became a chairman.
Chairman.
Then I was a
So
chairman.
can you tell me what was the time frame? It was like 80s, 90s, or
Right, I was a chairman in the '80s.
In 80s.
Early '80s.
early 80s?
Yeah, in
Mhm.
the early '80s. And
So
I
you were a
was chairman.
pretty young guy at that time, right?
Well, right, I was not quite. I was less than 40 years old.
Mhm. So
And I was
young.
the chairman of the church.
So
And what we had to do when I was the vice chairman and as the chairman is to try to keep the keep the income up level to the we wanted revenue, so we always had a parish picnic and raffle at the
Mhm.
All Saints Picnic Grove.
So, Dan, now I would like to ask you, um, as a chairman as a young person,
Yes.
energetic, I guess, with many ideas, many maybe goals. Um, you said about some activities, how to help the parish to be in a very stable and maybe lucky economical situation. So, what kind of activities did you have
Well,
at
what
that
we
time?
had basically, we had, well, of course you have raffles, but our father Kopilar, she was never really so happy to see gambling
Right. because churches should be more liturgical place and spiritual.
And we wanted social functions, so we had a lot of hard-working members of our parish adoration society, and then Father Kobilarz also had me out selling some ads for the bulletin.
Mm-hmm.
So we also put some of our good friends of our parish, like.
But did you have like for example dinners?
Right. I remember we always had. It was our adoration society, and I think that was a separate treasury, where they were always willing to help with any kind of a expense or problem that our church had. But it was a separate society and a separate.
So they were contributing to
They were
church,
contributing by having. They would have the Easter dinner, the Święconka,
Święconka and Pączki before Lent, right?
Well, and the Pączkis, right? They would sell the Pączkis maybe, and then they would have both an Easter and a Christmas dinner that were very well received, because these ladies put their heart and their soul into serving their church and working in the kitchen to put out a nice dinner. I remember many of the ladies. Mrs. Mateo was the one instrumental with the Adoration Society, and she was a very outspoken, maybe caustic in certain ways, but she really loved the church, and she always put the church in front of her own personal views. And then her son was George Belcar, and he became a big shot with the Supreme Council.
So,
and they're very very encouraging to younger people.
Dan, you mentioned General Synod, so go back to wider arena. You as a member of the Parish Committee, as an active member of the church, you participated in different diocesan meetings and global meetings of our church, or general meetings of our church.
Right.
Do you remember any of those meetings that you attended outside of Chicago, or maybe even in Chicago?
Right. Well, Tom wanted me right away to attend my first synod, and I couldn't tell you what year this would be, in the 70s. It would be at the Buffalo. We went to Buffalo. Pittsburgh, had a synod there, and I participated in that, and from that I could remember some of the bishops. I remember meeting and seeing some of the bishops from other dioceses, so Reverend Gannat and different reverends that I remember meeting, seeing these people. And the thing is that when you went to these synods, it was the preponderance of the business was just getting a lot of reports from the various commissions, Youth Commission, Music Scholarship.
So it was kind of boring, right?
United National Choir. So just getting these reports as to what they were doing and what their membership was like. It was a little bit boring, and then also.
I guess it was also interesting and exciting to meet
interesting.
people from different parishes, different states,
Yes.
that you share the same traditions, same responsibility, same goals, right?
Right. And I got to see Father Kovic again. He had moved to St. Mary's, maybe in Milwaukee, if that's right. And so Father Kovic, I got to see him again, and all the bishops, and of course the prime bishop was introduced to me, maybe not personally, but because we had a lot of delegates at that time, and it was a very big deal to go to Buffalo, Pittsburgh. I believe we flew in there. The church flew us in there. I don't recall a car trip at that time.
Have you been like in Scranton?
Right. We had also a synod in Scranton. I couldn't tell you when, if it was another middle 80s or. And we had a Scranton synod, and we actually didn't have the synod in Scranton, but the facilities that they provided for us were in the Poconos. It was a retreat in the Poconos, and Father Kobilarz, he would share a room to save costs. He would share a room with Stanley Kowalski to save money, and they I know they kind of downplayed the facilities. He used to call it the barn. I don't know. I'm not sure why or how that was. But Father was at that synod. Father Kobilarz, and actually Father Kobilarz was up probably at that synod. He was also nominated as a possible candidate for a regional bishop, but we would have hated to lose him because he was such a fiery spirit to help build our church and help. And we've been so rich with really great committee members all this time, people who are very sacrificing themselves and very much
dedicated.
They're dedicated. They're putting the love of the church ahead of their own private lives. I know our current chairman, even I told him, I said, you have to first